Many of us go through life believing we're the ones in control, that nothing is going to go terribly wrong if we do the right thing and look after ourselves. But sometimes, when we least expect it, life can be cruel and wildly unfair, reminding us of the fragility of our existence. Everything was ticking along nicely for Kish, enjoying a night out with friends last October when, out of nowhere, he started feeling overwhelmingly sick. Like any of us might, he brushed it off as food poisoning, but the reality was unfathomably more sinister.
When I was coming out of ICU, I said, I think it was either to my partner, Paul, or my mum, and I said, no tears, can't deal with tears. Suddenly I was like, I can't do this alone. I couldn't. And I wouldn't be where I'm sitting right now if it wasn't for my support system and my family and my friends that have been there for me.
Since his diagnosis, Kish has been through hell, enduring weeks in the ICU, gruelling chemo, and needing to have his bowel totally removed. Now he faces the daunting prospect of a bone marrow transplant to save his life. And despite everything he's going through, he's courageously campaigning to raise awareness and funding for the Leukaemia Foundation. You can find more information and how to donate in the show notes. This is Kish Modi's story.
Welcome to Young Blood, the volunteer video podcast dedicated to young men's mental health. I'm your host, Cal McPherson, and this is a platform for young men and their loved ones to share lived experience stories and show that no matter what you're going through, you're not alone. Suicide is the number one killer of young people, and changing that starts with speaking up. So let's do it. This show touches on some tough topics that may provoke strong emotions. If you find anything in this chat distressing, please do whatever you need to do to look after yourself. This episode is sponsored by Ski for Life, an Aussie charity that does a phenomenal job raising money and awareness to support mental health and suicide prevention in the community. Go to skiforlife.com.au to find out more.
Kish, where were you at in life before your diagnosis?
I was probably having the best year so far in life. So January 2023, I decided to leave a startup role, and I was the chief product officer. And I was actually setting up my own startup, my own dream startup. So I left. I was taking a bit of time off, and then I just finished a raise, some investors on board. And we were building out a product and actually going to launch this year in about February. But unfortunately, 14th of October, 2023, a day that I probably won't forget, normal day in the morning, we went to the markets, walked the dog. I was out with friends having beers on a rooftop. And when I was leaving, I looked at my partner, Paul, I said, I've got to go home. I feel really dizzy, actually. And that was Saturday night or Saturday evening. Came home. By the time I came home, I thought I had food poisoning, heaps of vomiting, diarrhea. Sunday, same thing. I was like, let's go to the chemist and buy the typical drugs that you would get if you had food poisoning. But things were getting worse and not better. And at one point on Sunday, my partner was like, hey, we should probably make a doctor's appointment. I didn't have a GP. I'm not someone usually, I actually pretty much never got sick. So I didn't really have a regular doctor or GP. So first I sat down, I was like, okay, let's make an online appointment with a GP. And we did that on the Monday. She looked at me on the screen and said, you've got to come in for a blood test. You look grey. By Monday evening, I was in hospital. By Wednesday, I was in ICU for a few weeks, and it's been a journey. So yeah, I've now got a stoma bag. It deteriorated. Part of my bowel and my rectum got removed. And this whole year I've kind of just been fighting my blood cancer.
Wow, there's a lot that happened in a very short time, sounds like. So had you experienced any health troubles prior to last October throughout your life, or anything major?
I mean, as a kid, I think I broke a foot once playing sport and things like that, but no major surgeries, no major illnesses. Like I said, I genuinely didn't have a GP that I would see very often. It wasn't something that I really thought of. It wasn't really top of mind in terms of my health was great. I used to work out, used to be really active. And even that, like when I had no signs really before I kind of got diagnosed, it was very sudden. There was one thing, I used to run quite comfortably, I'd be able to do sort of 5 to 10K jogging. And it used to be my sort of break from work. And on the Thursday before I ended up in hospital, I just remember trying to run, and I got to like 1K and I had to stop. Like, I was basically like, what's going on? But I didn't really think much of it. I kind of was like, oh, must be really stressed today, or, I'll probably go home and rest, or I didn't even tell my partner about it when I came home. I just kind of brushed it off. But that was probably one of my only warning signs that something's not quite right.
And blood cancer is novel in its lack of symptoms compared to other cancers.
Yes, correct. So, I mean, I didn't have many symptoms at all. Others, there is a few symptoms, but again, I think a lot of people brush them off. You can get things like night sweats, you can have fatigue, but they're not commonly known. There's no testing kit sent home to people to test for blood cancer. And unless you're getting blood tests super regularly, but even in my case, like I was told if I had a blood test, a couple months before my diagnosis, it probably would not have shown up. It wasn't my lack of doing anything. It wasn't a lifestyle thing. It wasn't that I didn't check. It just hit me and it came out of the blue and my experience has been pretty intense and pretty rapid.
So from thinking that you had food poisoning and then everything happening really rapidly after that, at what point did you get scared?
So I thought I had food poisoning, and then we contacted the local GP, went in, and there was this beautiful woman in the back of the medical centre that was taking my bloods, and she looked at me and she said, "Hey, Kish, I'll take your bloods, but you've got to go to hospital. Something's not right. I'm pretty scared that I'm going to take your blood and you may faint. I've been doing this for years. I've not really seen anyone looking like you do right now." That was kind of a first trigger point when I was like, okay, let's go to hospital. Then we were rushed through the ED room. I was probably triaged straight to the top. And at that point, I kind of looked at Paul and I was like, that's a bit weird. Like, there's a whole room of people waiting at RPA. Why am I getting such priority treatment? I thought I was going to be in hospital maybe a day or two. They'll do something, put me on a drip and I'll be home. And at one point when I was in the emergency room, still had no idea what was going on, but they said, "Hey, can you sign a bunch of papers? We need to give you a blood transfusion." And at that point, I think I was pretty scared already. I was like, hey, what's going on? Like, that's not blood transfusion. Like, sure, I'll sign it, but that's not food poisoning. Like, there's something else. And I started getting pretty scared. We were then in ED overnight, and about 2 or 3 a.m. In the morning, first my phone rang, and we still didn't really know what was happening. We were just seeing a bunch of doctors. But first my mobile phone rang, and then a couple of minutes later, because I didn't answer it, Paul, my partner's phone rang, and it was the doctor, Dr. Sophie, that we had seen online that day. And I was like, wait, what? Like, first, she's brand new GP. 2, why on earth is she calling us at 3 a.m. in the morning? But she would have got the blood test results that I had taken prior to that day. So I think at that point, she knew that I had leukemia, or more specifically AML, because it showed up on my blood tests. But we had no idea. And I think that was probably for me the trigger point where I kind of went from being pretty calm to then being like, someone tell me what's going on. And she didn't tell us on the phone because it wasn't her space to do so. But obviously even Paul, my partner, kind of went from being in the state of everything's going to be fine to, hang on, why would a doctor call us at 3 a.m. and check that we're in hospital? There's something's not quite right.
And just take us through receiving that diagnosis.
Even at that point, I didn't know what it was. I had ideas in my head, and first I was like, could this be cancer? Was one of those pieces. But it wasn't until 7 a.m. in the morning where then a hematologist came up to me and her words were, "Darling, do you know what's going on?" And I said, no one's told me. She said, "We've done a bunch of tests and I'm very sorry to say, but you've got leukemia." And I just remember screaming no really loudly in emergency. Again, because I was so fit prior and I had no symptoms and stuff, I was in denial for so long, right? Like, I was like, no, you're wrong. Like, do more tests. Like, can't be. It must be something else. You must be wrong. I also didn't really know what leukemia was. I'm going to be really honest. Like, I knew that it was a cancer, and I kind of knew it was a blood cancer, but beyond that, I'd never met anyone that had it, never really researched it. So the part of me was also like, hey, what is this? And if I'm totally honest, I think my only my only visualization of people that have had leukemia was kind of from like movies where you see like young children in hospital. And I was kind of like, oh, this is what's going to happen. And what I was going through my head of freaking out and being like, does this mean I'm potentially going to die? And what does this look like? So that was, pretty confronting.
And what did they say to you when you were asking those questions?
I actually didn't ask them out loud very often. So my health was deteriorating a lot. So that was then Tuesday morning. And like I said, by Wednesday I was in ICU. My heart, my lungs, my kidneys were all being severely impacted. It was pretty scary, I think, for my family and those around me. From Wednesday onwards, I think there's kind of like 2 to 3 weeks that I was in ICU, and that's just a blur to me. I don't remember much of it or any of it. I was in bed, couldn't get out of bed, had a bunch of things attached to me. Even my chemotherapy that they've given me is quite unique. They tried to give me, I guess, traditional chemotherapy or IV chemotherapy drugs at that point, and it almost killed me because my heart almost stopped. So I'm on a bunch of injections and tablets instead at this point. But I didn't really have information of what it was and what was happening, I would say, until the other side of that 3 to 4 weeks when I moved to a ward. And I was like, okay, well, this is where we're at now. And what do I have to do? Like, what is my treatment plan? Can I cure it? What is it that I have? AML. I was like, what's AML? Acute myeloid leukemia. Okay, cool. Tell me more about that. There was a bunch of questions and I needed a bunch of resources. And obviously even my family was like Googling things and talking to doctors and trying to find out more information. But it was, to be honest, initially it was quite hard.
So 1 minute your life's on track, you're living the dream, sounds like, and then the next minute it's all totally derailed. What is it like to be confronted with that reality out of nowhere?
I think the biggest word that comes to my mind is unfair. There's a lot of questions when you kind of go, why me? What did I do? Could I have changed something? Is it something that I specifically did that, made me deserve this? Those questions don't really have answers. Like the answer is no. There's nothing that I did from a lifestyle perspective that made this happen. I still have moments. It's not, you don't just go like this. I still have moments throughout my weeks and months where I feel that it's severely unfair and I don't deserve this. I deserve better. I've always been a bit of a perfectionist. I've always been someone, even at school, that was like, top grades, do the best at work, had a plan. This was my plan, right? Like save to do my own startup, raise from amazing investors, go out there and build something that I want to build. And then to have that taken away from me, even the biggest thing that I speak to a lot about this to my therapy, in my therapy sessions to my therapist is how, how dare cancer take that away from me? And it's something that I can't control. I like being in control and being in the driver's seat. And for once I wasn't. And in fact, I was completely out of control and I had very little idea of what was happening and why it was happening so fast. So yeah, I mean, to answer your question, stupidly scary would be my response.
And how long were you going back and forth in your head looking for answers and answers that you can't get because they aren't there? And this kind of cancer just strikes at random and there is no rhyme or reason to it. There are no lifestyle factors that you could have changed. It's just the definition of shit luck. Are you still going over in your head about that, or have you been able to come to terms with that in a way?
I am still going through that in my head. I would say it's definitely improved. So my journey, unfortunately, before it got better, got worse. I ICU for a few weeks. They then said to me that I can't have more chemotherapy until I get a permanent stoma bag. So I've got a bag at the moment. And actually, initially, it was meant to be temporary. They sort of said, hey, we can't give you more chemotherapy. You've got a hole in your rectum. And one of the biggest side effects for chemotherapy is gut toxicity. And I had these two teams. One was hematology, so everyone that looks up to blood, And then one was colorectal, which is essentially my bowel and my rectum and everything else in that space. And you had one team that was like, can't have more chemo. If that hole gets bigger in his rectum or his bowel, it could be life-threatening. And the other team was like, well, we need to give him chemotherapy to keep his cancer at bay. So then I had to face having surgery pretty quickly and having a stoma bag. I then inflated. So I went from sort of 70-ish kilos, which is my standard weight, to about 92 kilos. And it was all water retention. And I felt like a giant, almost balloon in hospital. And I had a bunch of collections and infections where I needed a bunch of drains. And I was then in bed and I couldn't really move. So it wasn't then suddenly just, hey, I've got blood cancer. I was then in hospital going, I've now got a stoma. I've also got all these drains that hurt and quite frankly were painful and quite disgusting when I was in hospital. And I couldn't really move. I was someone that used to, sleep on my side or on my front, and suddenly I was in hospital and I could only sleep on my back. I stared at the wall, I think, for about 2 months, and I was pretty silent and in my head. My family was exceptionally scared, actually. Everyone was trying to give me distractions. Why don't you watch Netflix or read a book or do something? And my response was, no, I don't want a distraction. I'm trying to figure out what's happening and why, and I can't.
What was going through your head?
There was a lot of why me on repeat. Why is this happening? Why is it getting worse? The doctors that were coming in and out, no one really had the answers, but things, even like, why I had the water retention or why I inflated like a balloon with all the infections, no one really knows why. I still haven't had those responses. And it was a lot of, oh, it will get better and we just have to keep working through it. And a lot of people say that to me, right? Like, oh, take it day by day. That's a statement that you hear a lot. It's true. It is true. It's actually one of the strategies that I've used. But when you're in that moment, when you have people say that to you, it's freaking annoying because you're like, well, I actually can't. Like my day right now is so freaking intense that I'm actually focusing more on like minute by minute or hour by hour. I can't. And it was one of the biggest learning actual points because even people, your network would find out that you're in hospital. So like suddenly I've got friends and friends of friends and family and stuff, and people would text you and be like, how are you? And I'd be like, what? I can't answer that. Like, I have no idea how I am. It's way bigger to a question. Like, I don't even know what I'm going to do in the next hour or two. So the questions that were going through my head were am I going to make it? And two, do I actually have the fight in me to continue? That's actually quite a big one. Like, can I keep doing whatever's happening to me? This is getting really hard. And my first hospital stint, like I was in hospital for 3.5 months. I just wanted to get home and have a normal life and get back to I hadn't seen my dog. And I just didn't know like how many more days I was going to be in hospital. And it was pretty full on.
Oh, I'm so sorry you've been through this depth of suffering. It sounds just absolutely horrendous and like you've had the worst possible reaction going through that, not only with the cancer, but from blowing up and all that discomfort and the stoma bag and losing your bowel. It's just incomprehensible, the level of pain and brutality that goes along with that. When you were asking those questions to yourself, am I going to make it, over those months, and you're pretty much thinking that on loop, what was the answer? Was there a voice within you even then? I mean, you're here in front of us today, so you have made it. Was there a voice that said, yeah, like I am, like a sense of, yeah, I'm going to pull through this, or not?
I think I had a little voice to start with. And it's not linear. It doesn't just grow in a linear fashion. You kind of, one day you wake up and you're like, I'm going to do this, right? I'm going to like screw cancer. Like, I don't care what the doctors say. I like, get me out of here. And then you feel defeated. Like other days you've got a drain in you. It's really painful. Something confronting happens. You have to deal with a bunch of nurses that some are amazing, some not so great. And you're like, it's just really hard, right? Like you kind of, you go through those periods. I was fortunate in the hematology ward that I was in. They had, I'd never really had a therapist before. Never saw any counselors or therapists before for anything like this. And she came to see me and she said, it's not just, don't just think about you and your fight. Think about everything that you've got that's worth fighting for. And I was like, well, what do you mean? And I remember that day, like my partner and my sisters were like, oh, we need photos. This hospital room needs to be like covered in photos all around the walls of like the dog and family events that have happened and just happy memories. I didn't like that initially because again, I was like, what are you doing? Like, I don't want to be staring at now walls of photos of how good life used to be. Because to be honest, initially it just was like, well, this sucks. Like that's everything I'm missing. And now I've just got my dog that I really want to see and is now in front of me every 2 seconds on a photo, which is not the same thing. But then kind of working on reframing that and going, well, no, actually, these are all the things that I've got in life that are amazing. And I'm going to continue hopefully battling through this so that on the other side, I can get back to my amazing life. Hard, still hard today. Like, I'm going for my bone marrow transplant in September. And I still have moments where I have to think like, that's really weird. I'm going to be packing a hospital bag to go to hospital and I'm going to say bye to my dog. And there's a sad chance that I may not see my dog again. That's still super confronting.
And your family's been going through this with you. Talk about that aspect of this, having them at your bedside and seeing the pain and distress in them and the fact that they can't actually fix this for someone that they love so much. What's it like to be on the other end of that and these people that you love so much who are there for you and you're seeing them in pain as well?
Extremely hard. So one of the things that my parents are amazing, my partner is amazing, and I've got 2 sisters, also phenomenal. I'm very fortunate. Not everyone has that. And I'm very aware that not everyone has the family support and friend support that I've had. When I was coming out of ICU, I said, I think it was either to my partner, Paul, or my mum, and I said, no tears. Can't deal with tears. We must be strong. I don't want to see anyone cry. And my mum's an incredibly strong, fierce Indian woman. And I think she took that quite literally. And she was like, no one is to cry in front of my son ever in hospital. No one's to cry. And that was the messaging, right? So like, and they didn't. No one really. I went through then quite a few months in hospital and I knew it was really hard for them, but they were like, we will be strong and we will be strong for you to take our strength and continue. And even messages like that, like my mum would hold my hand and say, you're not very strong today, but I'm here. And fuck, it makes me emotional. But and take my strength and continue. And I kind of did. Like there was moments where I was like, fuck, like, I can't do this. And even with my stoma bag, like I couldn't face it. Sorry. Fuck.
No, take your time. Take your time, Kish.
There was moments where I couldn't accept or see my stoma bag, and it was very much like, don't look at it. But I had my partner, Paul, who was like, I'll just do it. Nurses teach me. I will change his stoma bag. I will wipe it. And I was then being like, this is so weird. Like my partner's basically, wiping shit off me and cleaning it because I can't face it. So they've kind of been my rock. You kind of need to lean in. I'm not someone that likes asking for help. Never have. I'm prided on being independent, always being like, I will do this and I'll do it myself and it will be amazing. And I'm a control freak. I like doing things myself and being in control. Not only was that taken away from me, but suddenly I was like, I can't do this alone. I couldn't. And I wouldn't be where I'm sitting right now if it wasn't for my support system and my family and my friends that have been there for me. And I kind of did. I visually often was like, I had the mental image of taking somebody else's strength and going, that's okay. Like, if I can't get out of bed, people will sit by my bed. And if I can't have the strength to like feed myself today, somebody else will feed me. And they did.
That's love.
Yeah.
I love that framing of taking your loved one's strength, because I think it takes the pressure off you at every minute of every day. It allows you on those moments where it is too much and too overwhelming and you can't bear it, to reframe that in your mind and have your loved ones help bear that load for you. And that's a really powerful mental tool for dealing with such hardship. That was, yeah, really beautiful to hear about how your families approach that. And yeah, digging into that, talking about the stoma bag as well, you seem like a very dignified man, and that would be extremely important to you, as it would most people. And to have to deal with the embarrassment factor, these are things that you would never want your partner to have to deal with, and worrying about, how's that going to make them see me, and this is not the representation of me that I am, that I've worked hard to be, that this person loves. This is me at the lowest of low, and having to come to terms with that, and as well, like that's going to be so hard. And you've obviously found out that your partner's even more incredible than you would have imagined that they were willing to do that, because yeah, that's something else, isn't it? Being in that position.
Yes. So I think a lot of the thoughts that were going through my head around that, I think there was a moment where I was actually in hospital. I was still the size of a balloon. I was about 90 kilos. I had my stoma bag. I had a bunch of scars on me from surgeries that I had. And but I was fit enough that day to get out of bed and have a shower. Prior to that, I was basically getting body baths from the nurse. But I went and had a shower, and I looked in the mirror, and I remember looking at myself in the mirror. And I was like, I look nothing like me. Like, what is this? Like, I'm massive compared to what I used to be. Got a bunch of scars, and I've now got this bag. And it was kind of the first time I'd visualized, or actually seen myself, my reflection in a mirror. And Paul was there helping me shower, and I was like, this is not me. I don't look like me anymore. I didn't love my reflection. And then the biggest thing that was going through my head was my partner or fiance isn't going to want to be with me. Like, I don't look like me. I'm not me, both physically and mentally. Right now, I'm in a really low space. He's not going to find me attractive. Like, all these things were going through my head. And it was in one of my therapy sessions. Again, actually, I've got a therapist in the field, and I sat down, and the first thing I said to my therapist was, this is not something I normally do. And she goes, okay. And I said, I'm very much a practical type of thinker. I need you to whiteboard sessions and give me strategies of how to deal with things. I don't want to just sit in a chair and chat. It's not my thing. And she introduced me to something called cognitive behavioral therapy. And there's a bunch of stuff on this, I'm sure you're aware. And but one of the things in there is that, are your thoughts true? Is it helpful? What are the things there that are factual evidence to the thought being true versus against? And when I would sit in my head and go, hey, my partner Paul's going to leave me, he doesn't love me anymore, and all these thoughts would happen in my head, I was like, well, there's actually very few, if any, facts that actually prove that. Everything's on the opposite. He's there, he's day in day out. He loves me, he tells me that he cares for me, he tells me that he's going to do everything he can for us to fight this together. And it took me a while to kind of go, okay, that's not the case. I'm actually very fortunate, and we can work through this. And even my stoma bag, physically looking at it, it's still very confronting to me, but I do now appreciate, and I think my view on it has changed from, why did this bag happen to me, to actually, hey, this bag saved my life. Because without it, if we didn't have the scientific methods of giving someone a stoma, I actually wouldn't have made it. They wouldn't have been able to isolate the hole in my rectum and my bowel, and I probably would have actually died. They wouldn't have been able to give me the chemotherapy that I've had to fight my cancer, should I have not had a stoma bag. So in one way, actually, it saved my life.
Being able to find the positive and the silver lining in the hardest imaginable circumstances. But as human beings, to be able to survive what you're surviving, the amount of mental turmoil that you go through, you need to be able to do that reframing and do CBT and find a way through it in your own head, because if you can't, it's going to be too overwhelming and your body's going to follow your mind, and you're not going to make it. So yeah, you're finding the way to survive based on what works for you. And I like that real practical way of approaching it, where we have all these rational or irrational thoughts and fears and so many emotions in a situation like yours, being able to strip it back to, okay, well, what's the evidence for that though? Because that can ground you and bring you back to reality, and rather than catastrophizing, which is what the brain loves to do, it can bring you back to, well, what do we actually know? And then you might be able to find, obviously, some calm and some direction in that kind of thinking. So that seems really, really helpful. How has going through this changed you philosophically?
Appreciating the little moments in life. The fortunate, like, I'm obsessed, if you've not realized already, I'm obsessed with my dog, right? Spending time with my dog, walks, going to the dog park, just hanging out, being at home, having a cup of tea, sitting on the couch with my partner and my dog Otto is like so cool for me. And taking that away from me for 3 months when I was in hospital, I'm like, that's all I want to do. Everyone kept saying to me, what do you want to do? Do you want to go on holiday on the other side of this? Do you want to, like, go live on a beach somewhere for a bit, all this stuff? I'm like, actually don't. I'll go home and hang out with Otto and Paul, and go back to the simple pleasures in life of being able to go to the coffee shop up the road and just enjoy the moment. You take these things for granted, especially, I mean, being a young, fit male, I was always like, go, right? Like, work out in the morning. I was someone that got up at 5:30, 6 o'clock, went for my run, went to the gym, came home, had my healthy breakfast, got on with work, often worked crazy hours, and was always constantly like, what do I need to do next to be successful? And at times, maybe I didn't just appreciate the 20-minute walk that I did with my dog, or hanging out at the park with Paul, having coffee and walking Otto. Those moments are actually super precious. When someone takes things away from you, I mean, me personally, they were the moments I remembered. And I think that's what's changed. So definitely appreciating the little luxuries in life. When I've got the energy, they're the things I want to do. Like, I want to go to the dog park. I want to go for a 45-minute walk with my dog, right? Like, that's what's important to me.
What kind of dog is Otto?
He's a Cobber dog. So it's basically a Labradoodle, but he's a Cobber dog. And funny enough, and quite ironic, really, they're actually bred to be emotional therapy dogs and like companion dogs. So didn't know I was going to get this happen to me, but I've clearly got the right dog to support me through it.
And given that you are such an action man, and that a lot of your identity would have been wrapped up in being the productivity guy who gets a lot done and has all these big aspirations and smashes all the goals that he sets for himself, talk about that identity adjustment being befallen with this situation that you can't control.
It's a challenge in a lot of ways, actually. Sometimes it can be quite obsessive, right? So, like, let's use an example. I actually went from about 90 kilos. I lost all the water retention, and then I was 59 kilos and incredibly skinny. And my doctor said to me, you need to gain weight, because you're not going to otherwise be ready for your bone marrow transplant. You're way too fragile, and you need to gain more fat and muscle on you for us to be able to go. And I was like, yeah, okay, cool. Like, I can do this. I'll just work out lots. I'll eat lots. I'll have heaps of food and eat healthy and work out, and off we'll go. And I'd weigh myself on the scales, and it would be like, in my head would be like, I want to be 65 kilos by the end of the week. And it would be like 60. It was the opposite often to what people probably look at the scales for. But that was really hard. Not having, even on the other side of being out of hospital, not having the ability to control what was happening, or to be able to get as fit as fast as possible. It still is something that I struggle with. comes up a lot. So those are the two. You kind of, I mean, Callum, it's one of the first times that we're obviously talking to each other, and you've literally nailed the 2 points that my therapy focuses on most. One is, how do I gain more control? And the other one is, how am I a little bit more easy on myself when I don't have control? They are not things that I've fixed. Definitely, we're not at the end of any journey, and I don't know if we ever will be, but I've definitely been given tools and guidance from professionals that work in this space to help me kind of realize, hey, that's okay. Like, when I've gone from 60 to 62 kilos, but I wanted to be 65, actually, I should be saying, hey, high five, I got to 62 kilos. Like, that was hard. And we'll just keep going tomorrow, as opposed to being like, well, hang on, like, I'm not where I needed to be. And giving yourself space to be kind, and whatever that looks like for you when you're going through something this hard, is something else that I've also learned to do. Like, keep leaning into your network and people around you that are supporting you, and just be really honest with what you need from them to help you get through the next day.
What have you discovered within yourself that you didn't know was there?
I always knew when I have my mindset on something, I'm someone that usually gets it done one way or another. I didn't necessarily know just how strong I could be in times where I genuinely didn't have the energy. Like, laying in a hospital bed for 3 months, I couldn't eat physical food. I had like a pipe in me. Even when I was in the most fragile state, mentally being strong and going to your absolute lowest, but being able to come back from it, I didn't really know. I mean, I'd never been at that low before, so I didn't know that I could come out of something that felt so horrible. And I could actually turn that situation around, and, like, here we are talking about. I didn't think I could talk about it. Like, I was staring at a wall for a few months, and I couldn't talk, right? Like, I was not somebody who could physically chat about these things. The first time somebody mentioned therapy to me, I was like, no way am I talking to a complete stranger about what's going through my head right now. And now here we are recording a podcast. So I didn't know I necessarily had that in me to open up and share more, and that I could actually talk about it to the level that we're talking about it today.
Yeah, well, it's a huge amount of growth in a short amount of time when you really think about it. We're talking about you being diagnosed at the end of last year. We're only halfway through this year, and you've gone through all that and mentally gotten to the point that you're at now. I think the thing that stands out for me is you being able to let other people in, and as someone who's obviously fiercely independent, realizing the strength that's to be found in allowing others to help you, and that it doesn't come at the expense of your own strength, or it's not a blight against what you can and can't handle, but acknowledging that you're going to be stronger and more able to get through this if you can also allow other people to help you. And that's a message that we try to convey in a lot of these podcasts and a lot of different stories that often rings true. It's people being able to allow others to help them and feel like they don't have to take 100% of that burden at all times. But when you've been conditioned through your whole life to be that kind of person who is so independent and can just kick ass until from the time the sun goes up to the time the sun goes down, and nothing can stop you, you're unbreakable. That mindset is wonderful. It's a gift in that it gives you such drive, and it makes you someone who can break down walls to achieve everything that they want to achieve. But there do come times, like the time that you're in at the moment, where it doesn't matter how strong you are or how resilient you are or what the level of that mindset that you have, you need other people to be there for you. And for that to happen, you have to be able to accept that and not feel any shame attached to that, but see the beauty in it and pull the strength from that. And yeah, clearly you're an example of someone who's finding a way to do that. And even though you're conditioned in this way, which makes it you who you are, being able to go through therapy and also let other people in, it's just a huge amount of personal growth, which is going to benefit you beyond cancer as well, having gone through this experience? And when we talk about trying to find the positives, I think there's another pretty clear one as well. Are you visualizing life beyond cancer, or is it really still just that day to day?
I'm trying to. So I think I'm not really visualizing life beyond cancer just yet because I've got something really big ahead of me. So September, I'll be going back to hospital for my bone marrow transplant, also known as a stem cell transplant. It's pretty tough from everything that I've read and quite confronting again, but I'll be in hospital for at least a month, if not more. So if you're in hospital for 4 to 6 weeks, they basically suppress your immune system through pretty aggressive chemotherapy. And then I get a bone marrow transplant. And my blood cells kind of had to what they call engraft into my bone marrow. And then I have to be strong enough and have enough white blood cells before I can kind of come out into the world and fight basic infections. But even that, like, I might be fatigued for 3, 6, 12 months is some of the stories that I've read. Some are very fortunate. Some can go back to work in the matter of weeks. But some of the confronting stats, like 15 to 20% of people that get a bone marrow transplant don't make it. That's still going through my head, right? So I'm about to, in the next month or so, I'm getting ready for what does that look like. Part of me is incredibly fortunate because I've got a donor, I've got a match, and I'm in a position where I can actually have this transplant. I'm also young and fit, and hopefully we'll be able to fight through it. But to answer your question, like, am I visualizing life on the other side of that? I think at the moment I'm pretty consumed with two things. What do I need to do and get done before mid-September? Who do I want to see? Who do I want to hang out with? How many moments can I have with, my partner and my dog? And then how do I go back into hospital for an extended period of time? Which is also pretty hard for me. Like, that's been something else I've had to work through it with my therapist. Was I've had some of the worst things that have happened to me in life happen in hospital, and I have to go back to the same hospital with the same doctors and nurses, which are unbelievable. Like, they're amazing people, but for me, I associate them with the worst time of my life, and I now have to go back and face that for an extended period of time. My focus is on that, and how do I mentally and physically prepare myself for something like that before I can kind of look on the other side of it.
And where do you find the strength to do all that?
Sometimes I don't. Like, I still, right now, I may, come across as super strong and have my head screwed on and all the rest of it, but I still have moments where I break down. I think that's very human. And again, it goes like this, right? Like, you kind of go, I've got this, I'm going to do it. I'm going to raise as much awareness. I'm in a seat of privilege. Let me focus on fundraising. Let me focus on getting out there and raising awareness for blood cancer. And then sometimes I'm sitting on the couch going, oh my God, like, there's so many emotions and thoughts going through my head of what does the future hold. It's the same answer to your previous question in terms of, it's, for me, it's leaning into my network. It's okay. I've actually also had to accept, and I'm not someone that gets very emotional, but sometimes I've had to go, you know what? It's actually okay to cry. Like, it's just really bad at the moment. And if it means I'm going to sit there and cry for 20 minutes and let some of that emotion out, that's okay if that works for me. And that sometimes has been my coping mechanism. Like, there isn't always a positive spin that you can put on something. Like, sometimes things are how you perceive them, right? Like my stoma bag, I went from what on earth is this thing and how dare it happen to me to actually this bag saved my life. And that change in thought worked for me personally, and everyone's individual in this space, but it worked for me. I'm now coming to terms with it, and I see it in a different light. But not everything is like that. Like, me going in for my bone marrow transplant with the strong statistic of 15 to 20% of people don't make it. Like, there's no positive spin to that. That's just kind of like, focus as much as you can on the 80%, be as fit and as strong as you can, lean into your network, be there both mentally and physically. But there's still a chance that something could happen to me. That's a hard one to work through. And even going back to like all the frameworks, right? Like taking that through cognitive behavioral therapy frameworks, there's actually a load of facts that show that it is quite dangerous and it is quite full on, and there is truth to the fact that something negative could happen. So yeah, sometimes it has just been sitting there and sometimes crying and going, but that's my option and that's what I've got to fight through. So that's the path ahead, accepting that and giving it your best go.
You've also got a lot of evidence of what you can survive.
Correct. Something that I hear a lot. So both doctors and family have said to me, it won't be as bad as what you've already been through. That resonates a lot for me as someone who used to work out a lot. And I'm not sure if this will resonate with you, Callum, but sometimes I used to look back and, I used to be able to deadlift, for instance, like 80 kilos. And if I was to return to the gym today, I probably couldn't even do like 10 or 15. But knowing that I once upon a time did 80 helps, because you're like, well, I know what I can work up to and what I can endure, right? Random example, but that's the same thing. Like, yeah, you're right. Like going back into hospital, I'm kind of like, well, hang on, I did this for 3 months. Was it bad? Yeah, it was awful. But if I have to do it for a month, will it be as bad? No, it won't be. Hopefully there's a lot more knowns than unknowns this time. It's a familiar space. There's a few things that I have looked at and gone, okay, I've done worse before. I'll be able to do this and just keep going, right? Use all the strategies. And now, armed with hopefully a bunch of tools and frameworks that will help me in times when I'm not feeling mentally strong, that I can then hopefully help me process what's going through my head and be able to face the next day.
You've got proof for the narrative that you're the guy who survives, and you've got to have faith in that and believe that. And that faith and belief is grounded on something. It's not just a fool's hope. It's real. It's what you've been through, can't be taken away from you. And you've survived it and become the man who's sitting across from me via a screen now. And you can believe that you'll get through whatever is to come as well. I believe that, and certainly going to be rooting for you with this coming up. And I wholeheartedly believe that someone with your strength of character and with the support that you have, that you're going to be able to get through that and get to the other side of it. And I'm not you, but I just have such a strong sense from speaking to you that you're that kind of person, and that it's going to go that way. So I truly hope that it does. You're raising money for the Leukaemia Foundation. How can people support you?
I am. So I'm raising, as a family, we're actually going to be matching donations dollar for dollar up to $100,000 this year. I'm sitting around 54,000, I think, as of this week, which is amazing. That's a bunch of people that have jumped on and donated on my GoFundMe page. But yes, I'm raising money for them, and anyone that hears this and can, if they're fortunate enough that they can support, jump on and I'll double your donation.
And you're one of 140,000 in Australia going through this. So it's not just you.
Correct. And growing. That number's, today alone, 53 people will be diagnosed with blood cancer. A lot of what I've heard through organizations like the Leukaemia Foundation is that you're not alone. Meeting others, especially for me in my journey, has been amazing in terms of hearing someone, to your point, that's like me, that's struggled in a similar way, but is on the other side, has been really powerful. Is it hard? Absolutely. It's an absolutely horrible disease, and it takes a lot of lives. I think 6,000 people this year will die from blood cancers. So it's the second largest cancer cause of death in Australia, which is I didn't know that before I had blood cancer, but that's huge. And like, we need to do better. And that's why I'm doing things with the Leukaemia Foundation on a bunch of things. One, hopefully to go towards research and finding a cure. But then the other thing that they do is for patient services. So a lot of this conversation today has been about me and my support network and having people around me. Not everyone has that. So, if you think about people coming from regional Australia to hospital, may not have family and friends around them when they're going through something this tough. They may need financial assistance, right? Basic things like, hey, where's your mate on toast when you're recovering, or having to be next to hospital where you live to get your treatment. I've not had to deal with that on top of everything else I've had to deal with. And it goes back to what we initially discussed. Like, I am actually quite privileged in that space. I'm surrounded by people that are helping me. I'm very fortunate in terms of, even throughout hospital, like, I never actually ate hospital food. My mum and dad, my mum would travel 45 minutes, 50 minutes a day and be like, what do you want to eat? And she'd come every night in with her little thermos, and I would have made food. Amazing service, right? Like, she was like, no, my son doesn't like hospital food. He's not going to eat it. I'll just cook every day. I've been super fortunate. I'm well aware of how lucky I am in that space. And I want to raise more awareness and help those that aren't as fortunate as me.
Kish, thank you for sharing your story. We're rooting for you.
Thank you.
And
thanks for listening. And hopefully it helps people that are going through similar tough times. And if anything they take away from this is hopefully that they can get through it too.
Absolutely. I look forward to hearing from you after your procedure when you're in better health.
Legend. Thanks, Colin.
That's it for this episode. If you like what we're all about, support us by following Young Blood Men's Mental Health on Instagram and Young Blood Mental Health on TikTok. Every podcast episode is recorded in professional quality video, and they're all up on our Young Blood Men's Mental Health YouTube channel. So please show some love and subscribe. You can find everything there is to know about the podcast at youngbloodmensmentalhealth.com. And most importantly, please share these stories with anyone in your life who needs to know they're not alone. We're all in this together. Catch you next time.